Alright, so I'm going to do a book review, but before I do that, I wanted to give a generalized idea of what I say woke is, so that there's like a baseline if anybody wants to say this or that, this is what I think it is. And to do it, I'm going to draw an example, and first I'm going to start with just a little timeline. And I'm going to start with the civil rights movement. And then right around here, I'm going to say this is around 2000, and then this is present. And it used to be that we had a center, and we had the right, and we had what's being called the left now is really liberal. And the liberals did great things. They represent, fairness. And out of the civil rights movement, we see all the good things that they accomplished. And over time, for some reason, and you could say, some people will say this came out of Clinton and Obama administrations, maybe, maybe not. I'm not going to analyze that. But this left, or the liberals, kept moving further left, and the center stayed put. And so this relative distance between the right and the center stayed the same. And this kept going further this way until you had an extreme left. So this distance kept getting bigger and bigger over time. And pretty soon this scale ended up looking kind of like center, right, and way over here was the left. And right around, I guess, the middle or after maybe 2012 or something, it seemed like the right started realizing this, and we started getting an extreme right. So the liberal and the right really haven't moved. It's just that a great deal of attention has been given to this extreme left and also the extreme right, which are both totally wrong. You shouldn't go that far. And if you look at the qualities of the extreme right and the extreme left, they share a lot of commonalities, except for their main position and argument. They want you to submit, to obey, to join, to not fight back with their side, their argument. If you do, then you're out. There's something wrong with you. There is no flexibility. It's extremely emotional. There's no sense or logic in their arguments or their basis of reasoning. It's absolutely a form of insanity. And there was a French guy a long time ago, you've seen it in my introduction, that talked about mass transformation psychosis. And this is kind of what we were looking at. So the people in the center are really just like, what in the heck's going on? Can we just bring things back into the middle and have some peace again? The right is more galvanized than ever, and this happened because of what we saw that came out of COVID. All of a sudden the classrooms were in parents' homes. They were realizing what their kids were seeing at school and what they were being taught. And primarily that was CRT and some very radical sex ideologies that kids just absolutely don't need to see. I mean, they're not adults. You don't sell pornographic materials to kids for reasons. And, it's just, anyway. So my view of extreme left and extreme right is not liberal and right. It is not liberal and conservative. Extreme right and extreme left, those people are bonkers. The people in the center are probably the ones that don't care really one way or the other, and so we don't see too much effect out of them. But the extreme left really wants them, so they proactively go and get them. These are the door knockers you see. Anyway, so that's my idea on what left and right is. What is woke? Woke is anything that I can tell that has to do with CRT, which is critical race theory. This is really important because if you don't understand what this is, then you don't understand anything about woke. I recommend a book. It's called Faces at the Bottom of the Well. It's by Derek Bell. It was published in, I think, 1990. It's 90 or 99. And he uses basically storytelling, to communicate what the oppression is that exists between the blacks and the whites in America. And it's very narrowly focused on that. There's not much wiggle room. But the problem is that oppressed groups saw that feature of his argument and said, well, hey, that works. Let's join in. And so pretty soon all groups of an oppressor nature started falling into the CRT framework for making argument. and it has a very postmodern approach to it. And so I'm not going to get into the technicalities and the philosophies of that, but it started with CRT. And so then you also have things that involve sex, and I don't know what's up with the sex, but it's specifically targeted at kids now. I mean, literally just kids. And I'll give you an example on that here in a sec. And then, of course, there's extreme religion and politics. None of these should ever be in a classroom. But I'll tell you something that a history professor of mine once said, that the classroom is the greatest form of dictatorship, because you will obey the instructor, you will believe these things, or you will at least pretend to get your grade, or you will fail. And that's kind of not a big deal when you're a little kid, but as you get into high school, and there's a lot of peer pressure and performance pressures and getting your grades, then it increases some. But by the time you're in college, now you're fighting money, because you are paying a tuition, and if you want to get your degree that you think is going to get you, a job, and plus you're building up this debt, it's critical that you conform, or your money's going to waste. You're not going to get your degree. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. So by the time you're into college, it's a do or die situation. And that's what we're seeing now. That's what this book's going to be about. I'm going to give you one more analogy, and that is what the battlefront looks like, because there is kind of a battle going on, and it's the weirdest thing that I have ever seen, ever. Normally when there is a concerted effort against anything, and there's two sides to the argument, the extreme left and the extreme right in this case, but we can narrow it. We can say just the liberal and the conservatives too. There's usually a line, some kind of a battle line, where you can go up to it and you say, this is where I go, I advance no further. The other guys on this side, they advance no further. We're going to meet in the middle and duke it out, so to speak. But if it ever got to that point where you could actually call for something like a civil war, and I do not advocate for that, but there are a lot of people that are actually starting to think along those lines. You hear it on the news and you hear it on podcasts, and it's just, when you start talking about it, it creates concern. So when I hear that, I ask every one of them, I was like, so where are you going to have this battle? Where's this civil war going to take place? It's not like during the American Civil War, where you had a North and a South, and there was a clear line of battle, and everybody knew where they were going to fight. That doesn't exist. Also, the battle isn't just in America, and a lot of these ideologies, especially what we see here, want to focus on that. Go look at newspapers from other countries. I've got one in here from the UK, I think. It's not just, they report on us, we report on them, but the so-called safe countries, Norway and Sweden and Finland and Greenland and whatever these other ones are, and then of course Australia and the Europeans and France and Germany, it's happening everywhere, this weird battle between people wanting this woke to be gone and to stop. So what is woke? And what does the battlefield look like? And the closest analogy that I can think of is I think of like two little saucers, and let's put salt in one and sugar in another. Now, upon examination, if you were to look in those bowls, anybody that does any kind of cooking or uses these materials can probably identify by just looking the difference between them, even though they're both the same color. And we're not going to go there on that part. But by just looking at them, you can probably tell. What else can you do? You can smell them, and you can definitely smell the difference between salt and sugar. And you can touch them, and you can feel a difference. So there's different senses you can use to tell the difference between these two. And so these represent the opposite fields of battle and how society looks at us internally. So these individual grains of salt are people, and the same for the sugar. But if we mix them together in a bowl, and they are a mixture, not a solution. They haven't been solved together yet with the liquid. We can't really tell the difference anymore, because they're so small and there's so much of them, and they're so, because we stir them up with something, they're so integrated with each other that they're literally like your neighbors. And that's what the battlefield looks like. It's this final saucer with the mixture in them. Now, it seems kind of hopeless, because you're now looking at, well, you can't tell people apart. The left and right, just looking at a person, for the most part, usually you can't say, well, that person's conservative or that person's liberal. You have to wait until they say something or do something or take a stand. And so, and a lot of people are silent. Very few people are articulate their side or their position and stand for it. Most of them are quiet, and until there's some kind of an event that rises up and you see a bunch of Antifa people that want to remain nameless, they want to be completely incognito, you know, masks and stuff like that. They want to go out and fight and yell and scream and have an emotional tantrum and hurt people and destroy property, but they don't want you to know who they are because they're not really that committed for their side to spend the rest of their lives in jail. They're not that committed, but they may get that way. So now it looks hopeless because your battlefield is all in one container and it's everywhere, all over the world in all the different countries. How do you deal with this? Because without having a clear line of battle, how can you possibly have a civil war? And if you don't have a civil war and the sides keep going in opposite directions and getting worse and worse and worse, what does that eventually look like in society? So there is hope, because since this is a mixture, it is possible to separate it. It is extremely difficult. You'd have to sit down with a dissecting microscope or something, and sit there and say, that's a grain of salt, that's a grain of sugar, that's a grain of salt. It would take forever to do it, but it would be possible. But you wouldn't accomplish anything by doing that anyway, because the sugar is still going to be the sugar, and the salt's still going to be the salt. You've just identified people. And I believe that that's the next step that they're going to try to do. They're going to try to take the mixture of population, for instance in the United States, and they're going to run all the people that are in a database. And you are in a database, whether you like it or not. You're on a YouTube database. This person, me, for this channel, has obviously been in a salt container, and it is more salty than the sugar. And they'll figure that out just from the content you watch and why you watch it. If you're curious, go and Google, why does YouTube recommend conservative information more than liberal? Well, it makes more ad revenue. So they're going to eventually be able to separate people, since you can't talk to everybody and you can't see where everybody stands on a subject. You can look at what they look at and see what kind of subject matter did they consume. Do these people, and they'll figure who it out, they will figure who is out, and they will say, well, these people over here watch this kind of content and they use these kind of apps like TikTok or something. And these people over here watch this particular kind of content, which is usually, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but it seems to be that the conservative content is more cerebral for some reason. And eventually they'll have that list of people, and it will be a matter of going and getting them. And we're already starting to see that to some magnitude. So for me, this is what the battlefield looks like. The content of the battlefield is this woke thing that's going on. And the thing that bothers me the most, that gives me the greatest concern, is what they're doing to children. Why kids? What is up with the children? Because you want to lump it all together in one for some reason, that it's not just what you're putting into their minds, but it's the nature of what it is that you're trying to do with them. It's not just bad, and it's not just weird. It is categorically an evil thing. And I don't know how to convey that, because I have a more scientist mindset than I do this otherworldly stuff that these kids are going through. And it bothers me to no end that they're doing it to them. And it's not just me, of course. Parents all over the nation, and I'm getting back to America, are waking up to this. So we'll take a quick look at a couple of things here before I get into this book review, which will be a separate video. This is a Virginia mom told a local school board last week that her 6-year-old daughter had been told she was born evil. This is a critical race theory, and this is out of Loudoun County. Most people know about this by now. This is just one example. And they've covered up rape and arrest and humiliated people and falsely accused them. And now parents were all of a sudden accused of being terrorists by the FBI. And then when they are questioned, well, why did you do that? They skirt all around the issue, which is really strange. And this kept going on. This became a political issue. This is wrong for kids to get involved, and parents, and it become a political issue for getting votes. I mean, the raging controversy over school curricula is taking place against the backdrop of the highly competitive Virginia gubernatorial race, as fears grow among Democrats that the GOP could seize the governorship. Okay, so we're using kids as pawns to win elections. That's just one facet of it, but the main facet of it is you're hurting kids one way or the other. This one just came out in the last few days. This is the dean of an elite school in Chicago has been caught on video openly discussing how students as young as 14 were handling dildos and butt plugs. This is an extremely adult content. I mean, this is, in my opinion, beyond age 21 stuff, but whatever. You can't do that with somebody's kids. I mean, you might as well, what are they going to do? The next step is to actually have someone come into the classroom and be hired and paid to perform the act of sex in front of kids. You're that close away from that. And then the thing that's absolutely ludicrous about this is after this guy gets caught, in the video, you can go and see it. You can just Google this guy. His name's Joseph Bruno. The school comes to his defense. He was filmed without his knowledge or permission while describing one example of our inclusive, LGBTQ affirming, and a comprehensive approach to sex education. The school, the educators are defending this guy for stuff that he did without permission, according to the video, is my understanding, with kids as young as 14. You're telling me that this is even remotely okay? So, anyway, I just wanted to be clear on my idea of what left and right are and what woke is, because woke is basically anything that goes into an education system, be it the curriculum, the way the teacher teaches, activities that they do, videos that they watch, audio that they listen to, any kind of content that breaks from the primary elements of learning. I mean, we're really talking about mathematics, reading skills, grammar, composition, history, of course. You know, you need to know world history, American history, maybe history of other things. Literature, which basically the classics of literature, and you know, the core elements of teaching. But if you see, like I heard of a math problem that said, you know, this young kid was traveling at so many miles an hour and he had to get to this point, and it was just a simple calculation. But inside the problem was a critical race theory, because the kids weren't just kids, they were black kids and white kids, you know, and there was a clear distinction made in the problem, and I can't give a really good example because I don't know how to make one on my own very well. But you could clearly see in the math problem that it was slanted towards a racist ideology. And so the kid is picking up on this as they're trying to solve the math problem and are incidentally thinking in their head, what does this mean? My nephew, here just a week or so ago, asked his grandma, my mom, if you were given 2 spoons of white spoon and a black spoon, which would you pick? And my mom, having no clue what the question meant and thought it was just the ramblings of an 8-year-old, said, well, I guess I'd take the white spoon. And with the instantaneous response, my nephew said, well, you're racist. And she's telling me the story, and I'm like, how in the world did that get stuck in his head? Who put that there? And surely that's not being taught in his school. So we're seeing this literally infiltrating kids, and the kids are literally the programming base. If you guys know I'm a programmer, so if I wanted to program an entire society to do something, I would definitely start with the kids. Because if you can get it into their head that something is true, they are going to copy that. And that's what you see in colleges with professors and instructors putting out students that comply with whatever nonsense, even if it's wrong. They're making carbon copies of themselves, and then those kids are going out into the world, those young adults, and they're teaching and believing what their professors and instructors did, and it's tearing society to pieces because it is rooted in communism, Marxism, the socialism, all the isms that we don't want, none of the isms we do want. And anyway, that's the end of my diatribe, not really a diatribe, but just discussion on what I think the differences are, what the battlefield looks like, and why I've changed all of my content from technical, which you're used to seeing here on the kitchen table, is me making stuff, you know, to this. Because people have got to start focusing on it. And that's it. Thanks for watching, and now after a long wait and a lot of preparation and foundation work for this entirely new content, I'm going to start looking at this book from Antioch University, and we'll go from there. And again, if you know about the other videos and you want to report a school that has woke education in it, I'll also have a link for that video where you can report that, and I'll put it up on the AVLD website. Thanks again for watching.